Hi, I'm Prophet Azad, and you're watching Atheist Edge.
All right,
Mhm.
so here we are, middle of August, and the last time we did a recording session in person in studio was like early April. So April, May, June, July. It's been 4 months. We knew about the pandemic back then, but it hadn't hit the United States yet. We had no idea what was going to happen. So what has been happening with you in the last 4 months? Life-changing events, and how have you been coping with the pandemic? And what have you been doing to relieve the stressors that are caused by it?
Um, so I was a counselor. I am a counselor for children. And what I was doing before is going out in the field and driving around and seeing people in person every day. And so my daily life changed pretty drastically because I went from that to doing video chats with all of my kids. But in terms of like my job and my income and things, that hasn't changed at all, which has been, I've been extremely lucky with that. And so I've actually had a lot of changes happen because of COVID that are positive, way more that way than negative. I can't really think of anything negative that it has impacted me except like not being able to see a lot of my family and stuff, because you don't want to put them in danger. But I have been very lucky because I was just starting kind of a newer relationship at the time that the pandemic started. And because of COVID, we ended up spending an extreme amount of time together because we were quarantining together. And so it just fast tracked the relationship. And before the show, you were talking about how that's a kind of a theme with a lot of people, where it sort of either tests their relationship because they're spending too much time together, or it fast tracks it because you're spending the equivalent of a much longer time period with each other, if it were under normal circumstances. So we just ended up spending like 24 hours a day since, I would say, April. And it's just been like really wonderful. So now we're like, we're just at such a higher level. We live together now. We were separate then. And we've just been like fast tracked. It's been great.
Have you noticed a difference in how this virus, the pandemic, has been affecting the psyches, the mindsets of the children that you're treating?
Yeah, I mean, some kids I work with have anxiety, and sometimes that can make people really nervous about what's going to happen. And especially with school, since I work with kids between the ages of 7 and 17, it's a big range, but everybody I work with has something to do with grade school, junior high, high school. And so they're all being affected in a big way because their school has been disrupted. And so, it's been easier for me to have a more normal, like 9 to 5 schedule because I can contact people during the day because it's summertime. But now that school starts, I'm going to have to go back to like my more evening schedule. But again, it like isn't going to be as difficult to manage as it is when I go in person because, yeah, it's just the logistics of everything are going to be interesting.
How long do you see this staying this way? I know you're not a virologist or epidemiologist. Is it epidemiology? Yeah. But how? I know they're testing vaccines in Russia has something that might not have a really high efficacy, but there's some. It seems like there's some light at the end of the tunnel in certain countries.
I mean, hopefully.
How much longer do you see this? Because we have a recording session. I don't know. You already know. October 3rd. I'm planning on having Arn Raw, you, me, and some other guests, and making an actually is an in-studio recording session. Is it safe to at least try to plan it for early October?
I wouldn't think so. because
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's way too soon to me. I was probably going to want to do something more remote for a while just because we really have no idea. Like, I feel like, I don't know in terms of large groups gatherings where it might be much longer until we can do something like that. Something like this is much smaller, what you're talking about, so that might be a little bit more feasible sooner. But I wouldn't see, like, for the next year being able to like get together in person with any level of like safety. But I think if we are,
I miss you too much.
I know. Well,
I don't want to
on
wait
the other hand,
more.
though,
I don't want to wait another 6 months.
I know. But on the other hand, I think that the like self-quarantining with everybody, if we can kind of ask everybody that's involved to try and be as careful as possible leading up to that, I still feel like that wouldn't be as safe as it could be. Like, I feel like we can do the same thing like we're doing now and like have it be more remote.
Yeah. And to be honest, it didn't dawn on me, but I've got it's a full-time job. It's like 60 to 80 hours a week. Actually, I'm constantly working. It's for the census and it's temporary. At the end of October, it'll be done. But even though I'm masking up and I'm real far away from the people that I interview door to door, I'm in contact with a lot of people. So yeah, that would be a needless needless pressure on you guys, because who knows, I've been in contact with too many people.
Yeah, and I think if you think of yourself as a person that's not quite at risk, you're still always in contact with people who are.
Yep.
And so each one of us kind of taking responsibility for being as cautious as we can be for the sake of those people is the best bet. Just if all of us were a little bit more careful, I think it would subside a lot sooner.
I've got some breathing problems from one of the bases that I was stationed in. It had a lot of coral dust, and so it caused 3 years in Guantanamo Bay. It affected my respiratory system, and it's still affecting me to this day. So if I were to catch it, I think it could be bad. So I'm extra careful. But
Right.
I'm going to ask you. Here's a curveball, Courtney. What would you rather do tomorrow? Forget the pandemic. All right. So which of these three things would you rather do tomorrow? Which would be more preferable to you? Talking to the press about separation of church and state, again, or giving a lecture on bodily autonomy and sexual education, again, or doing a meet and greet, ask an atheist Q&A at a mega church, again. So the press or a lecture or a Q&A.
Well, as you know, I absolutely love all of those three things. I love doing all of them. I really like talking about all of those topics and educating people and sharing perspectives. But I think the thing that's the closest to my heart in terms of how important it is to me and how important I feel it is for other people would definitely be like the sex education stuff. Because I feel like that has such a deep impact, and separation of church and state is something I care a lot about, and educating religious people about atheism I care a lot about. But sex education is something that is like the biggest issue in my life. I really love that. So that's probably what I would do.
Education, that has absolutely nothing to do with secularism or atheism, but if you think about it,
it really, really does.
Sexual norms are dictated primarily by religion or lack thereof. So I think your religious views factor heavily into your sexual practices and the way you look at your health and what you feel you can and can't do with your own body. And
right.
So yeah, I think it does factor in.
Yeah, and it's also, it becomes such a religious issue because of the prevalence of religious rhetoric in the current sex education system in America. under Trump, you have a he reinstated the mandate for all government-funded sex education programs to be abstinence only. So Obama rolled that back, and Trump, of course, put it back in place. And so it's something that makes STDs, teen pregnancy, skyrocket when you have a lack of education, otherwise known as abstinence-only education, because you have a purposeful misinformation that is extremely damaging, more damaging than no program at all for the statistics' sake, but also for the level of like guilt and shame and like dirtiness that is tied to people's bodies, especially women's bodies. And but I think both people are, like, men and women, and you know, the diversity of gender and of orientation is a whole different subject that isn't touched on with the Christian version of sex education. So that's a huge other issue, where those people are not represented at all, and they're treated as if they don't exist at all. And so that's a huge issue. But the level of like general shame and guilt and fear around sexuality, instead of it being a kind of a celebration of life experience and something that can be tied to fertility if you want it to be, but doesn't have to be, like, these things are such an essential part of a human life. And it's so important to get right, and it just isn't.
We didn't feel the effects of that rollback because Texas has always been abstinence. I'm not drunk. I just can't say it. Abstinence only. And I'm about to say another word that sounds like you're drunk even when you're not. Recidivism. Oh, I said it right. Holy shit.
Very nice.
So Texas is number one. I don't know if you knew this. Texas is still number one in teen pregnancy recidivism. So
like having more than one child?
Yes, a second child teen pregnancy. A second.
All right, let's.
I know, right?
For
Did
the
you know
listeners,
that? You didn't know that?
No.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't surprise me.
We're
So for the
one.
listen, it's not that in Texas the highest rate is of teen pregnancy. It's the highest rate of teens getting pregnant more than once.
Or twice or more, yeah.
Oh, like you don't. Oh.
Yeah, we're number one.
Oh, it's so bad.
And it ties directly to the abstinence only. My youngest daughter, she came back from the talk. It was in the auditorium. It was maybe 30 minutes long, and I did some research. The group that comes in to do it, totally church-based. And it was basically just say no for 30, 45 minutes. And that was their sex talk for the year. That was their sex talk for all of high school.
Yeah. And that's a whole topic.
Anyway.
As you know, but I've given talks on it, but it's just like there's the guilt and shame issue, but there's also intentional misinformation saying that condoms are much less effective than they actually are. There's rhetoric that that condoms are like, 15% failure rate, and that's only if they're used incorrectly. But they characterize it as this is the rate of failure, which means that it encourages children to, if they do have sex, to not use them, and to have the consequence of that be what keeps them from doing it again, right? So the main goal of abstinence only is to get kids afraid of their own bodies and to reject any sense of like their own bodily autonomy when it comes to sexuality, to deny themselves that, and to have this guilt and shame and fear, instead of the goal being to lower the percentage of teen pregnancy or to keep children safe from STDs. Like that should be the goal of education, to prepare children for when they are ready to enter into this phase of life in a safe and intentional way that is a positive thing in their life. But it's seen as something that is negative and scary, and that also affects the level of like the conversations about pleasure, especially around female pleasure, with sexuality, because both men and women, but especially women, are taught about sexuality in terms of like anatomy and fertility and the mechanics of it, but there's no discussion about how to understand what feels good for you, or how to ask what feels good for your partner, and how to even gain consent as well. Like, consent is a huge part of the conversation that's missing as well in sex education across the board. So pleasure isn't talked about, consent isn't talked about, and so sexuality is something that should be a positive thing, but for a lot of people, those things don't get to a level where they're actually enjoying that stage of their life until much later into their sexual lives. And that's just really, really sad.
We touched on what of those three, which one you would prefer to do tomorrow, but of the other two, talking to the press, you were the mouthpiece of Metroplex Atheist for 2 years. You dealt with the press a lot. You were comfortable in front of worldwide cameras. So what appealed to you about like speaking to the world about separation of church and state? Did you feel any pressure to say the right thing, or?
I mean, obviously you feel like a pressure that you want to do it right. But I do think that I had spent so much time speaking on these issues already by the time I did something like that, that I knew exactly what I wanted to say. And I also knew that most people in the US especially don't have these conversations, don't hear about these topics, because the separation of church and state is something that's kind of talked about in general, but the specifics of it are talked about more within the atheist community than other places, I think. So especially things like the national motto needing to change back, and the things that we were talking about are things that really the atheist community, we talk about amongst ourselves, and we're very practiced at that conversation. But the general population has never heard of it, or they don't know that it matters. And so getting to explain that to especially Christians was really amazing. And when I got to do the speech to like the 200 people that came to the Botanical Gardens, there were some Christians in there, and I got to have really amazing conversations with some Christians who at first were against what we were saying because they didn't quite understand what we were arguing for. And that was the best part of that experience, was to sit with them and listen to their concerns about it, and get to explain to them why they are on our side as well, why we're on their side, where what we're arguing for benefits them as well.
I happened to be a fly on the wall on one of those conversations in the back room. That lady that during the Q&A asked you or Aaron, I forget which one, but yeah, and I was actually witness to one of those conversations in the back room. And if it changes, that whole day was worth it if it changed just one mind, like, oh, okay, this benefits all of us, even the believers, which is awesome. Yeah. The Q&As at the churches that we've done, would you like to see more of that? Did you like that? Or
always? Yeah.
Do you think there's any productivity coming out of that too?
I think if your productivity line, if your goal is to convert people away from Christianity, then I wouldn't say that is the best way to do it. I mean, I think it's more, for me, it's more about building bridges with different groups of people and helping them understand that, like, you're not the enemy, you're not against them, and that you respect their right to hold the beliefs that they hold. And I heard somebody, I think it was Mr. Atheist, was saying today, I'm going to lose what it was, but it was something about like I don't have any issue with people holding personal beliefs. And the day that my main goal is to deconvert Christians, is to like get people away from believing, is a happy day, because that means that all the other issues would be taken care of all the harm and heartache and difficulty that comes out of these different religions, of the negative ways that these affect people, the believers themselves. That is the issue that most atheists are behind, and that's the issue that most atheists want to solve. And that's why joining with the moderate believers to solve those issues within those communities is a really good thing. But I just thought that was so eloquently put, that, you know, the day that the only thing I argue about is trying to convert you out of your religion is like, you know, that's the day that I stop doing it, you know, because I don't care if you believe. It's great for you, that's fine. But what I care about is the negative way that religions affect other people. And so that's what we're arguing for. And I think a lot of Christians can get on board.
Yeah, I think that, and seeing, like, when that lady approached you at that one church and she pulled you aside and said, I wouldn't have, you know, before this started, I saw you and I didn't know you were one of the atheists. I had no idea that this nice, sweet girl, you know, and putting a positive face on atheism is another thing. It's just, I think that in itself is worth going to these things.
Right.
We don't have horns growing out of our head. We're in the society with you.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, because atheists don't always get a chance to really speak about their beliefs to Christians in front of an audience of Christians, the only ideas that they get about atheism are from the media, and sometimes that's really, really negative. Or even worse, sometimes from their own pulpit is some really negative rhetoric about atheists and like what's in our heart and all of that. And so we get to change that narrative when we stand up and speak for ourselves. And that's something that I find really rewarding.
I was going to save this next question for later in the show, but you touched on something that made it a perfect segue. So I'm going to ask it now. You mentioned building bridges. I don't even know how to go about this one. I have been frustrated, bad taste in my mouth with the polarization in general and within the atheist community. And I unilaterally, without my co-hosts at the time, it was you, me, and Chris, I didn't even think to ask you guys. So right there, I'm at fault. And I said, the 23 commandments that we live by, those are gone. The building bridges part of our motto, building bridges, finding common ground and having fun, that's gone. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The gloves are off. We haven't resorted to name calling in 3 years. I'm not above that anymore. Should I already know the answer to this. Should I have checked with you guys first? Should I have made a unilateral decision? And do you at least see my point, if not agree with me, that the divisiveness in our community is beyond repair?
Well, I mean, as you know, I am blissfully unaware of most things that go on social media because I don't have Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I don't have those things. I have Facebook and I have email, and that's pretty much it. So I've kind of delved into the Discord world with my other channel In Time, but like it's again something that I'm very limited in looking at. So I don't typically even read the YouTube comments. I would like to, but you know, we've had some horror shows with with reading comments. And so I'm not aware of what brought on the change in what you wanted to do. I do think that that it would have been nice to have a conversation about it. But I think that no matter what's going on in the outside world, I think that there's nothing stopping us from still representing those things and trying to lead by example with other people, you know. So I don't support changing what we stand for because of what else is going on around us, but you know,
let me break in real quick. I don't normally break in. I'll let you.
You're good.
Okay. Do you, at the very least, I don't even ask you if you support the decision. Do you, at the very least, will you still be a part of Atheist Edge if me, the editor and producer, occasionally, because we went 3 years without blocking anybody. We had, that was part of the 23 commandments. We didn't block trolls. We didn't block anything. It was a pure marketplace of free speech. And now I'm at the point where, okay, spam Christians, if they spam the same Bible verse 50 times, we've kept a few of them, and we label the rest spam. So we've done that for 3 years. But just nasty trollish behavior is gone now. So
well,
I think you're okay with that, right?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to treat a troll like a troll and to block them.
Okay.
I know that was your decision at the very beginning to not block anyone, and to not disable any comments and things like that. But I do think that as long as the conversation is productive, then that's a good thing to aim for. But if something gets devolved into like really toxic things, especially if people are doxing each other or something like that, then that becomes very inappropriate. And I think it is appropriate for us to make that kind of call for our own channel, because we're facilitating a conversation. And if the conversation isn't productive or it becomes really nasty and toxic, then I think that's our responsibility to kind of shut it down.
Well, it feels very weird hitting the block button. I have never done it, so it is. It's happened 3 times since I made the decision, and it feels just very foreign to me.
I do think that you can do that and like make a conscious decision to try and be sparing with that as you feel comfortable, and then still, not name calling, or I still believe in building bridges. I think that's, to me, that hasn't changed at all anyway. Because that's my reason for doing any of this,
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think we're still in line with our commandments, but
But again, I think that doesn't include trolls though. Like I think trolls are something that's separate, and they're not engaging in good faith with you. And so I think building bridges with people who are engaging in good faith is what I'm talking about.
I was just on someone else's show, a Christian show, day before yesterday, and it was a great hour and a half conversation, and I think it was actually productive. So I'm still with you on that.
Yeah, this is Harper. She's she's
Aria,
2 now.
Aria, here quickly. We're not. This isn't part of the show. Just come look at this. This is Jason, Courtney's boyfriend's niece. They made a pillow of her. And it's a cute kid, but look at this fucking pillow.
Oh my gosh, have you ever seen his flawless beauty?
Oh my, that is the creepiest shit. Oh, it's too real.
He said that pillow's the creepiest shit.
No, but let him know that that's a beautiful kid. But
it's a beautiful kid.
But
I'll have to send you a picture of her because she's really cute. But
have you ever heard of the uncanny valley, Courtney? Uncanny valley?
No.
The uncanny valley is a term in artificial intelligence where, okay, imagine a graph, okay? The uncanny valley, it's like a graph that starts off high. And by high meaning when artificial intelligent machines, either like the code, like the software, or the hardware, like the actual, like when a robotic AI comes into existence, it will start off it will look very non-human. So it's very appealing to us because it doesn't attack our senses. So it's a very high appeal ratio. As AI reaches a different level and it starts looking more and more human, the graph hits a big trough, a big trench, and it becomes more and more unnerving. And because it looks human, but it looks wrong. And then it comes back out of the trench and hits another high point once that robot gets to something that's indistinguishable as a human. So the uncanny valley is there's a point in AI that's just going to creep us out until it comes back out the other side.
Oh.
Are you ready? Jesus. Oh, I have to say something.
What?
I put on the
I just realized
calendar.
I had to put a sweater.
Oh, I put on the calendar 2000, not 2100. So I put 8 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. So this whole time, like when I sent you the link, I thought I was sending it to you 30 minutes early, not an hour and a half early. So this whole time I've been cussing your name, thinking, oh, just like Courtney. Oh, yeah, here we go again.
Oh, rude.
And, oh, I know. And it was totally my fault.
Well, yeah, I was saying 9 o'clock.
Yep. And I scrolled back, and sure enough, I was the idiot.